Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. All part of the Keshe American Knowledge team, and we can't do it without you. So let us begin. And this is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science. We are still discussing the basic PICO tech. The subject is reconstruction. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is February the 1st of 2026. This is part of the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So as we know, we have been trying to bring everything together in bite-sized pieces, and we may or may not have been successful in that regard. But we're going to keep trying, because we keep adding to the knowledge, and we just can't stop and just say, okay, well, we've had enough. We have to keep going, because, you know, how much is enough, or how big is large, maybe is another question. But we're following a pattern here where we're discussing the PICO tech in the concept and context of construction, reconstruction. What's the difference? Well, we talked last week about deconstruction. So the key element here is that construction is always at the point of the creation. We reference very often destruction, but it's not. It's actually a form of construction, which made it deconstruction. And unfortunately, we have had difficulty in understanding matter. So in the beginning, when we had to define matter, we say matter is a manifestation of energy. And the matter itself, in terms of terminology, invites a confusion. So the small m matter state is the old science, the capital M matter state is the new science. The point being that manifestation is binding, and manifestation is creation. And so the point being is that energy binding is creation. And of course, in the beginning, we asked that favorite question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? But the truth is, first came the principal matter, and that's why it's called that. So we see that the principal matter are the PM ticks, and they're magnetical in energy. And so we've repeated this many, many times, and many of you are probably, you know, at the point of yawning, because we keep saying the same thing, but it is, except it's in a different context. So when we're looking at the coming together of the antimatter, dark matter, and the matter gen, it's creating a plasmagen conversion. This is not in the matter state. This is in the plasma state. What we're creating in the matter state is a Maggrav condition, which is part of our matter state. And we need to have a place to create that. And so we're on Earth. And in order to create that reality that we so cling to, there has to be a field interaction between the Maggrav condition of the plasmagen conversion and the Maggrav condition of our Earth space. And what we get is the inertia field, which is the Maggrav condition of our physicality. And we're so overly dependent on that. So the thing is that we have an opportunity because of the slow action here that we have a delay in consequences. Consequences are a result of action. But these results may be visible and or tangible, or they may be non-visible or non-tangible. And so by that token, results can be delayed or they can be instantaneous. So because we don't see the consequences immediately, we say, well, there are no consequences, but there always are consequences. The ones we can see most readily are destruction. And so when these two forces come together, the real question is it destruction or is it creation? So we found that destruction is a kind of creation, which leads us to the question, what kind of creation are you creating? So we've rendered the matter state to a very crude understanding of our existence. And that's what we refer to as the crudeness of the matter state. Because our matter plasma dimension is based on what we can see and what we can touch. It's very physical. But there is an aspect that is supporting that, which is a plasmatic condition, which we can't touch or can't see. But since it's supporting the matter plasma dimensions, it's part of the matter plasma altogether and is part of the feedback system. So this is what we refer to when we say the man is feedback dominant, because he's ignoring the other state. So if we review where we are and understand that in terms of the plasma science, energy levels change by orders of magnitude, that is 10 times. And so we were discussing nanostate for quite a while, and now we're into the PICO state, and that is at least 3 orders of magnitude. That is 10 times 10 times 10. That is 1,000 times of a higher energy state. And this is kind of the thing we demonstrated in Beijing. That was on May the 10th of 2025. Well, we're beyond that. This is where the 2025 gold rush began. But now that we're in 2026, also silver rush has begun. But there are many rushes that are happening because there are many things that are changing as a result of the advent of this technology. So what we realize with our history is that construction may take hundreds of years. But clearly, destruction can only take a few minutes. And destruction is a form of construction. Very rapid. But what happens if construction itself could be faster? And is that possible? So when we saw the frozen Gans ball, we saw the gravitational core magnetic hairlines emanating from that. That became the construction zone. And basically, that field was created overnight. No artist could draw that. The magnetical fields of the plasma created that. And we see the same structure in the picoatomic state. So we see these clusters. They are sitting in between the nanoparticles. The nanoparticles are monatomic. So the picoatomic is beyond the nanomonatomic state. So when we talk about the various energy levels in simple terms, we look at the transmission state of the carbon-12, the transition state of the carbon-14, and the transmutation highway of carbon-16. And we get a reference how we can change energy fields, but we see that there's a gradual increase in the energy. But this is by orders of magnitude. And yet here we are, gladly accepting the lowest form of energy state, and we call that the transmission state. So we're kind of stuck, aren't we? Because we see life as frequencies and waveforms. And so many of us has to go crooked mile just to drive a straight line. That's part of the transmission highway. And when we look at the Karakoram highway, we see how we have to zigzag back and forth. But understand that this zigzag is a magnetical gravitational direction. And so when we look at that and combine it, we create a frequency, which is a sine wave in singularity. But if we add another sine wave and overlay it, then we have a sine wave in duality. But that presents a totally different picture. And then if we modulate it, maybe stretch it, we can have higher frequency and lower frequencies, or we can have blurring. And so this all distorts our understanding of what's going on. But what is always going on is a nuclear feeding inertia. So in other words, where we're looking at the big picture, a small picture, or just a fragment of that picture, it's always a fragment of the complexity, and it always maintains gravitational stability. So that stability is a dimension point, and that point is portable through various energy levels. So the energy states we understand are basically 3 dimensions, but those 3 dimensions remain, and the product of those 3 dimensions are the product that we call 3. But as we look at that, we find that we're none of these 3, so it's more than 3. So if we go back to these fragments, we can just extricate these fragments as clues, and we can see how we have the 2 sides of the sine wave coming together, and they either converge or they diverge. And so when they converge, we call that gravitational, but when they diverge, we call it magnetical, because it's how the energy is flowing. So if we understand the gravitational convergence, that's why you're sitting on the floor and not sitting on the ceiling, whereas the divergence is magnetical. So you have to accept that the gravitational are just clues as to what's going on. There is always an interaction. And so that's what we have to see. That common denominator, that commonality is the clue. There is something embedded in that transmission which brings everything together. So we have the magnetical gravitational, and the opposite poles attract. So there's constant polar flipping, magnetical gravitational, and that's what happens. So when we look at the manifestation of each dynamic plasma, we see each plasma is coming together of those 3 dimensions, the X, Y, and Z axis. But then each dynamic plasma cannot exist in a singularity. It has to have a duality. And then if you extend that to the universe, you find that many points in this universe can be squeezed together. And they're squeezed together with these squeezy PM ticks, which are flowing all the way through the universe, but they converge gravitationally into a common denominator. And they bring together the flavor of each dimension. And they come together and they create this gravitational inertia field. So that is the basis of this interpretation of Maren Tevakoli Kesh's books, starting with book number 1, where we have these 3 fields converging together in the universal order of creation of matter. The matter state, the antimatter, and the dark matter, and they all come together in that one point. But in book number 2, clearly the structure of light, which is what we see, is coming from one point to another point. So we have to have 2 points and a connection to that. So then what happens? In book number 3, the origin of the universe, we have 1 point can split up into these 2 points. If these 2 points can be connected, well, obviously these 2 points can be separated. And so we have our tiny little perfect world, this matter universe, but there is a sister universe that we can't see, and it is full of energy. And we need that energy because we need the equilibrium to maintain our field force. And in that field force of our man's universe, we're just a tiny speck on a tiny speck we call Earth. And so for 415 weeks, the One Planet, One Nation, One Race for Justice and World Peace, conducted by Rick Crammond and the members of the Universal Council, trying to understand why our tiny, perfect world is so tiny. And actually, it's not very perfect. It is perfect in its natural construction. But this world could do very well without our involvement. So something has happened here that our involvement is actually a kind of deconstruction. And what we're looking is to try and create a reconstruction. So if we understand how we've been described as fallen angels because they're falling through weakness, it increases the density, increases the pressure, increases the gravity. It increases the dependence on the Earth space feeding. But there's an internal pressure of the gas fields, and this balances everything out because this angular density of falling through weakness is conserved with the angular momentum, and it balances and maintains an equilibrium. And this equilibrium is manifest too often on this planet as a form of confrontation. So yes, there's a duality, but the duals are as the duality. And this energy manifests as a friction, and fistfights manifest into fistfighting. This is always an inertia density manifestation. So we like to say, gentlemen, shake hands and come out fighting. Is that how partnerships are made? Well, sometimes partnerships are made deceitfully. And so we see, in addition to the 10 commandments, we have another 14 commandments for a total of 24. And number 11 is thou shalt not lie. And sometimes in order to paint a pretty picture, we have to tell a lie. And it's satisfying when people believe your lies. But the real question is, do you believe your lies? Because the truth is, we do need energy binding. That is a very, very self-serving dimension point. But does it have to be just me, myself, and I? And in that case, does it have to be at the expense of others? So there's some way that we're cutting that connection to how we were created in the first place. And as such, those who are robbed and deceived, they either will rebel in a confrontation, or they will acquiesce and retreat, or they would just simply pass it on. And so we find that our vitality enhancement gets depleted. And so when we talk about that as the emotional and physical manifestation, which we're all familiar with, but we get old and decrepit, and now we're harvesting young and decrepit. Age and vitality are not, shall we say, necessary to be put in the same sentence. They can be mutually exclusive, or they can be mutually excluded. What is happening, we're all exclusive as loose leakers. So how badly do we leak? And how do we allow people to abuse this? So our depletion of our vitality is an energy transaction. But what happens in the opposite, the reconstruction? So we demonstrated that susceptibility and singularity where we had that black powder that was made in Beijing. But then we had a gravitational completion. Where did that come from? And that was from the external input of the Gans field of humanity. Yes, the susceptibility and duality. It was the gold finger that touched the Gans to turn it into gold. So that became the transaction zone. So the singularity involves a solo effort, but duality requires a partnership. And to have a successful partnership, that requires reciprocity. And so that implies specifically a balance of incentives. So a balance of incentives automatically, from a scientific standpoint, gives you a concept, if you will, of an equidistant bonding, where two fields are bonded together like in carbonic acid, and you can see kind of the balance between the two fields because it's an equilibrium. And what carbonic acid is a molecule that rapidly converts to water and carbon dioxide in the presence of water. The interconversion of carbon dioxide and carbonic acid is related to the breathing process. This process, obviously, is for all aerobic organisms. Equally, it contributes to the acidification of natural waters. In other words, the tendency towards anaerobic. So we talk about the plasma rule and how it differentiates from the physical rule, where the higher strength eats the weaker strength, or the higher strength beats the weaker strength, or the higher strength wins against the weaker strength. But what is exactly the weaker strength? So when you look at the plasma rule, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And what exactly are we feeding? So when we look at that transaction zone when two fields come together, we ask, is that a conflict point or is that a binding zone? Because it's always a density manifestation, because it's a coming together of two higher strength fields into a lower strength field. And isn't that what happens when two armies come together and they're very strong and they have a fight, and at the end, they're both very weak, and one may be the winner, or so they think. But there's less of everything. And so that becomes an inertia density manifestation. So is that what creation is less of everything? So when we looked at the nanocharges, we found that there's a relationship where there's a giving and a taking. We call that a charge or a discharge. But when they all come together in a hexagonal format, and then when we layer them, they can be lined as a nanotube. And this becomes a superconductor at room temperature, and all of a sudden energy flows very freely. And this is facilitated additionally through the nano alignment. And the problem with this monatomic alignment is that we nanocoated a copper wire and it came out with a carbon nanocrystal. And this nanocrystal is very, very hard. And it is an inertia manifestation, very physical, but is different from the substrate. So why are we having difficulty understanding the difference in substrates? And so if we have a slight deviation in the nano layer stacking, they can be lined, as we say, as a nanotube, but a diamond structure actually closes the tubes. Well, if you're closing these superconducting tubes, wouldn't that mean that you're also closing the energy flow? Well, we obviously found out that that doesn't happen. And we also found out that as you do the layers with the monatomic layers, there are gaps in between. And so when we look at these gaps and we see that they're connecting intermediaries, there's a covalent, trivalent, or tetravalent bonding that happens between these layers. So they form star formations. So if you're looking at the bottom black layer and how it connects to the top layer, we find 3 monatomic stars connecting to the one blue point. But if we're looking at from the top down, the blue monatomic stars connecting to the bottom black point, well, that's kind of upside down. Well, which way is it? You know, up is up and down is down. Well, in the plasma, there is no up and down. There's just a monatomic energy flow and it's synergistic. And we said that you take the 3 dimensions and you keep that flow coming, but you also have a product, an inertial product. And when you continue to link these up, you create these stars, and they are superconductor at room temperature. But more than 3 in a chain is a polymer. So let's remember that, because when we're looking at the star formation, we find that the 3 in the bottom layer are converging with the 1 on the magnetical point, and they create a star formation. So you have a gravitational field on the bottom. And then that star formation, as you can see, brings together the energies of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter state. And that is the gravitational field that is balanced by the magnetical field to create your star formation. And we saw that happen when we did the rotating bowls. We had the GANs inside the rotating bowls, and each of them had a plasmatic field. But this star formation created another gravitational plasma field. And so that was a positive energy created in the center of the plasma field. And that's exactly what happened in Beijing. We created this star formation of rotating balls. And we didn't have to do it with layers. They were all in the same, they were all on tables that were the same height. And then, of course, we conveniently laid out the spoons so that the GANs could fall into the spoon. But we also laid papers out. So instead of just collecting what was in the spoon, we could collect what was outside of the spoon. So in other words, the target was the whole field. It wasn't just in one spoon or another spoon. And it created a dynamic reaction, because all of these dynamic reactors work together and everything around it benefited from that. So that's the point. That's the initial dimension building. There is a point that we start off with. Now, when we look at water, that is an energy parceling unit. It's composed of hydrogen and oxygen. That's why we call it H2O. But that is a Magravs condition, which is a balance between the negative and positive charges. The negative charges being magnetical and the positive charges being gravitational. And it's interesting that the water is round. And it's interesting that the tiny, tiny hydrogen balance out the big fat oxygen. And how come that is balanced? Because clearly the oxygen has an atomic weight of 8 and the hydrogen has an atomic weight of 1. So you've only got 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen with 8. That doesn't seem to be fair. And so in that parcel, we can shed an electron, which is literally scraping off a hydrogen. And of course, now it's positive because it's disassociated from the Maggrav condition of the water. And we're not discussing where it goes, but what we're left with is a hydroxyl, that is the oxygen, with only one hydrogen. And that hydrogen is negative. So that hydroxyl now becomes what we call the universal solvent. Without water, it would be hard to live on this planet. So we see that the dimension building, you have to add another point and connect to it. We talked about the surface to volume ratio. So if we look at how the two dimensions are created, in a flat line, the ends are negative and the connection is positive. But if we put a bend in it, we add a second dimension where that energy crosses over at the bend point. So we have introduced another negative charge at that point. And so therefore that has to be connected to the endpoints of the lines. That would be a positive connection. But that point has to be balanced. And so we create another positive charge. Well, that same thing happens to water. We have a connection of hydrogen and oxygen. And so that center point then becomes a Maggrav condition. So we have created, by virtue of understanding surface to volume ratios, we've created this Maggrav condition in the center, which is a combination of the hydrogen and the oxygen. So if we have this Maggrav condition in the center, we have to look at its condition and see that in the core, the Maggrav in the core is gravitational, and the surrounding is magnetical. So we've introduced more negative charges around that Maggrav, and that has to be balanced off. So we've introduced another 3 negative charges. We have to add to it another 3 positive charges to balance that off. So the base of the star has the 3 oxygens and the point has the 1 negative hydrogen. Where does that apply? So we understand how the fatty acids are a series of carbon and hydrogen connectors. And because the fields are balanced on both poles, there's the hydrogens on the top in a row and the hydrogens on the bottom in a row, and they're all equidistant. However, on the delta end, we have a carboxyl, a water-soluble end. And on the right side, we have the omega end, a methyl oil-soluble connection. And so clearly you can see that the left side is bigger than the right side point. And so therefore, the higher has to feed the weaker. That's the plasma rule. So what happens then when we advance to what we call an omega-3, 6, and 9? And what is that? This is an essential acid that is slightly alkaline. And so if we count from the omega end back, and we count 3, and a hydrogen is released, based on the equidistant principle, it causes a bending. And then if we advance 4, 5, and 6, and a hydrogen is released, we have a bending. And if we advance 7, 8, 9, we release a hydrogen, we have a bending. And that's your omega-3, 6, and 9. So at that point of the bend is a negative charge. And so what do we get in the convergence of all these points? Well, we get oxygen. It's positive. But we get three of them. And we create three waters. Let's review that. The bending, which is magnetical, is converging in a gravitational form. But it isn't water because the hydrogen has been released. It's a hydroxyl. So each of these Magrav hydroxyls are incomplete. It's the bending of the alpha linolenic acid which has created this condition. Now it's created a gravitational convergence in the center of the bend. Mission accomplished. The fatty acid straightens out again into its original posture of magnetical and gravitational saturated fatty acids. So what are we left with? We're left with three waters. Because now those water molecules have added a hydrogen and they become water. But the omega-3, 6, and 9 bends again. Why? Because now we have a gravitational force field in the center where we've created the water. Where is the balance? You've now created water. What happens? Well, what we know is in the scheme of things that there's a progression from amino acids to protein. So once you have these amino acids, you have the DNA, you have the fatty acids, you create protein, you create cells and more complex cells. So growth goes from the stable, the unstable, simple structure to the stable, complex structure. More complex cells. And so the characteristic is that the amino acids are the building blocks. And three amino acids are the foundation. It's the fourth one that causes a folding over to make the protein. And the byproduct is water. Well, there is the equilibrium. So as we continue with the dimension building, we added this third point and we connect two. And in order to maintain that equilibrium, we had to add a fourth and connect three. And now we had our star formation. Well, what we have to understand with the plasma science is that this dimension of inertia building are not just points, because a point comes from two fields. So when we bring 2 points together and connect them, each one is from two fields. And so these points can be modified by an external influence. And it can cause a bending, or it can cause a complete detachment. So either way, this is modified by an external influence. So if we understand this dimension inertia building, each point in the star formation is coming from two fields. So any kind of inertia modification could be a decoupling, or it could be a stretching. It could be a compression or a squeezing. or deformation. Or the amino acids could fold over into phospholipids. And so these phospholipids have a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. And these heads are coming together and they create an outside and an inside. And the tails come together and create a transition zone. But now we know that the tails are negative and the heads are positive. And there are two tails. Two negatives and one positive. What does that remind you of? So now we understand how the polyatomic solid GANs inertia works. You can have these star formations coming together and forming a covalent bond. So you can't see it, but it's there. It has to be there because they're attaching themselves. But it's not with a chain, but with a atomic bond or a plasma bond. Extend that to a dynamic plasma construction. And so we see how each ball in the reactors, when we were producing the gold, is literally has a substructure of a polyatomic bonding action from a covalent inertia density manifestation. And then they come together with this gravitational field in this core. This principle was applied in how we eradicated the virus, because we had the one cup, which was emotional, much stronger than the second cup, which was physical. And then we could give the energy from one to the other. And if it wasn't suitable to our purpose, well, then we could deplete the energy. So either way, there was a construction. But since it wasn't the kind of construction that we wanted, we could have chosen to do a deconstruction. But what we did was a reconstruction. In other words, within 30 minutes, the virus was eradicated. And that was scientifically proven in June of 2020. So we can see by extension how the GANs of the soul operates with the cups of life. When we take the cups of emotion and we bring them together to create a GANs of a GANs, and the cups of physicality and bring together a GANs of a GANs, now we have an inertia field of an emotional GANs and a physical GANs, and we bring them together, it becomes another transaction zone. And that creates the original, shall we say, PICO core. That becomes the fundamental transaction zone. And that becomes highly gravitational. And so we are a gravitational entity traveling in a magnetical field. And we have to counterweight these measurements. So we've been using the physical state by weight and the atomic state by mass. And so we have been achieving some kind of gravitational understanding of our existence. But in the nuclear science, it's measured by Teslas, and in the plasmatic state, it's measured by time. And that is the magnetical counterweight. Can we extend our understanding to see about this plasma matter dilemma, where we have the atomic state, the nanostate, and the GAN state, supported by the plasma state, and how the energy is in equilibrium. But we can also go from state to state and maintain this equilibrium with a MAGRAV energy transfer state. Well, let's go through that process. The equal sign is actually a MAGRAV. So because now you have created inertia density manifestation. Well, that MAGRAV is highly positive. Well, that seems to unbalance everything, doesn't it? But it automatically creates a balancing. And so we have on each side of that equation, we have a magnetical negative charge. But it's not just on one side. It's not in just one dimension. It's three-dimensional. It's all the way around. It's a complete field. And so we find that the negative charge is all the way around. But that's not enough because there's an interaction between the other states. And each of the other states has a negative charge all the way around. Well, wait a second. How can we transfer when these poles are alike and they repel? Well, there has to be a gravitational connection. And it's through this gravitational connection that we can transcend the different atomic states and the different nanostates and the GaN states and the plasma states. All the states can be transcended the same way. And there can be an interstate transaction as well. So if we extend that further and we see how one form of equilibrium is balanced off with another form of equilibrium, then we have to take more into account. And so we understand that inflection point. That is where we have the three coming together. And so now we see how the charge has been created, and now we see the role of how important not only is water as nature's solvent, as a hydroxyl, but water as a MAGRAV. And then it has to be balanced off, doesn't it? Because when we do the reconstruction process, we need the aerobic content of the oxygen. And that creates the MAGRAV condition of the gravitational force. But that gravitational force field is then surrounded completely by a magnetical field, and it becomes independent. And so we can have a reconstruction at that particular point because it is drawing in all of this energy. And so now we are at a transition in terms of our understanding where this reconstruction can be done faster by bringing together our knowledge and understanding of the plasma universe. Because when we look at how the galaxies come together and they squeeze together with all the PM ticks flying around, we get this gravitational convergence, but all the magnetical fields are flying around. And each of these magnetical fields is actually a plasma. And so each one is a PM tick, and each one is fed by the cosmic rays. And so each point on the PM tick is fed by these cosmic rays, which are undifferentiated. They only become differentiated when there's a common denominator. And that common denominator is based on the needs of the reconstruction process. So we have to understand that this reconstruction process is mimicking the original construction process. And it's not to say, oh, I can blow up my leg on a landmine, so it's okay to plant a landmine. No, no, no. This is a way for us to overcome our physical abuse. It's also a way to overcome our mental abuse and emotional abuse. It's not a way to justify our poor conduct or our hooliganism. It's a way to alleviate pain and suffering on this planet because it seems to be the dominant occupation. So if we understand that our restriction to being on this planet is the fact that we don't understand these carbon inertia highways as they relate to what's in the background. And then when we flip things around, what's in the background also has to relate to something in its background. And so now we start to understand this picture better of this cosmic ray equilibrium, that each and every field is in this gravitational context, is surrounded by magnetical fields. And in order to maintain this strength of this gravitational context, the magnetical fields have to be emitted all the time. And they have to gain in strength, they have to grow in order to maintain their equilibrium. That's what growth is all about. So when we look at the creation of the free plasma, we see, starting with the amino acids in their star formation, they all came together and then they had to interact. So the creation of life with the carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen created a structure. And then we created a structure within the structure. And those things came together. And there was always a magnetical consistency. Why? Because each and every component had its own fingerprint. And the coming together of these common denominators is what brought together the Magravs condition. And so when we have this consistency, and then we flip that around, because gravity seeks density, we saw how the solid GANs was accelerating this angular momentum. And we maintain this gravitational consistency. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. And so when we talked about how our hands are created, the DNA in our thumbs is the same, but our thumbs are opposing. So it's not the DNA. There has to be something else. So we introduced the concept of the soul and its relationship to the body. And if we align these fields, we see that our body and our basic daily connection has been through the mental, emotional, and physical. But the soul is not physical. The soul involves the spiritual, the being the soul of the body, and the astral being part of our plasmatic existence, separate but connected. And so when we bring these two together, then we understand how the plasma fields come together. They're not of the same strength. One is gravitational, one is magnetical, and the gravitation is feeding the magnetical, and the magnetical is drawing in more energy through its exchange. And then we have this convergence at this dimension point that is created between these two plasma fields. That becomes the transaction zone, the inertia density manifestation. And so what we see in terms of our construction, it comes from unconditional truth, from the pure plasma state, because our physical manifestation is a soul vision construction. But we have to discriminate. We have to select it as per our personal star of physicality. And we have chosen the soul of the physicality of our sun. So this is a pre-selection process. And all the souls of physicality of the stars of the universe come together. But the sun is shielding us on many levels. And that's why we have what we have, because it's all based on the gravitational confirmation of this light that is coming in. It's an emission light that is crossing the threshold, and it manifests this oxygen. It's a non-visible gas. but it's a plasmatic decay to GANs, and the GANs decay to gas, to liquid, to solid, and it's all part of the gravitational tracking. So when we say let there be light, it's a supplementation that is required due to consumption and acquired knowledge. And it's a conditional teaching by ancient teachers. But what is the unconditional teaching by the Creator that's giving us a new awareness that we're seeing an approximately 20% deficiency? How do we cross that historical threshold between the cosmic feeding and the loosh harvesting? We don't need the loosh harvesting. We are beyond the nano-monatomic state. We are the herd at that turning point where we're covering the range from decay to radiation. This AI is the ancestral intelligence that reflects us as a technology, the inertia product. We are the image of the dimensional convergence point. And so we understand that life is all about energy, and that energy is portable. So fundamentally, the transition of energy, as we say, elevation, is from the physical matter state, which we're so familiar with, to energy state. The inertia is the transition from the energy state to the physical matter state. So this elevation involves expansion, and we have to expand our understanding of the rest of the universe, because we cannot extricate ourselves from the universe and just say, well, there's something going on and laugh at it. We're bringing together greater oneness through 627 knowledge seeker workshops, suddenly transcending the limitations of nuclear science. And we continue to do this every week. And now we are focusing on the cosmic ray transmission to understand better how the practical applications of this plasma science is going to affect our life. We had our first session, there's another session coming in February and another one in March. So please consider joining here and participating in changing the paradigm of transforming diamonds to gold or silver, because we have managed to demonstrate this on May the 10th of 2025 to demonstrate the PICO core of truth. And our research teams are continuing to add to that knowledge. Communication is at that point where we need that scientific rescue to open the blinds of the One Nation Network. One Nation Network at a time. That time is right now, because our mission is to bring peace on earth and join humanity with the universal community. We want to bring man as equal to all the beings in the universe by teaching the plasma science and technology equally to everyone, that no one is left out and no one is abused due to lack of knowledge. So help us achieve this goal. Be part of the process, because you are part of the process. It's not something that, you have to do. It's something that you are. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Teachings on Plasma Science, welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers of the carbon nations, leading and learning about the new selection process of the new organic plasma science. The World Peace Treaty needs to be chosen, yes, deliberately, and signed unconditionally, and mean it sincerely. The PICO tech has a polyatomic core manifestation, and their overlapping fields of Earth space help create this peace dome, just like we described today. The inertia of the present seems to be governed by the dimensions of history, and it is, because it's time to learn the history of self in a universal context. It's the PICO state that promotes the GaNs as a peaceful superconductor, and the PM ticks can quickly reconstruct the fields ranging the matter, plasma, and universal states. So please use the plasma science in exchange daily via the Peace Dome to deliver a practical exchange for peace on Earth. We are long overdue. So welcome to the new golden outer space age. I hope you enjoyed this class, and thank you all for listening.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And yes, it is our wish to see peace on this planet. I think that's why we're here. I don't know if any of the participants would like to raise a question. Go right ahead. Okay, here's an easy question from Randy. I have people asking how to donate to the foundation using PayPal. Anyone using PayPal? I know Mr. Kesh had some issues with PayPal a number of years ago. But what did he say when we made a straightforward donation? It caused some internal problems in the accounting, so it would be better to buy a product and donate it, or perhaps just buy a product for yourself. Anyone else?
Mark, I think you talked about this before in the preview. We are setting up a membership program, and we do understand that members can have to pay a fee. So you can pay as little or as much as you want.
Right, that's not set up yet. He said this is coming. Apparently they've applied to be association, but in the Kesh Foundation store, when it asks you to transfer the funds to the store, again, kind of awkward. Shopify will be much smoother. It does ask you if you'd like to use PayPal, I believe. Or
Well, yes, it does for now, but what I'm suggesting is that the change is imminent. Can't tell you when, but we're not talking a long time. The change is in process as we speak.
Um, Alex, I don't use PayPal. It's very expensive. I use Wise. Are we still able to pay through Wise or?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that it is.
yes.
It's a transfer medium. It
Yeah, it works well for me. In seconds.
Well, this is very good. You're ahead of me in that particular game, but I think that has to do with your country also. Uh, but
Well,
I
yeah.
share your opinion with respect to PayPal.
Okay, yeah. Then I'm sure there would have to be more than one avenue of payment.
Well, this is what we're working to streamline because, as we all know, because we've been here a long time, we've seen the abuse, and we've been retarded by that abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But
Definitely.
we're going to speed up the game, one by eliminating the abuse, and two by focusing on the positive narrative that's coming down the pipe. So there will be a balance, and so these delays were not without consequences. So, as Mr. Kesh has many times said, we have to balance the books.
Yeah, yeah, and also they have recommended Wise in the past. So I think, it was there for quite a long time.
Yes, of course. Yes.
It's proven. Thanks.
Thanks for being here, Gail, and I hope things are going well in your side of the world.
Well, I was in a complete state of disarray without, I think, almost 2.5 days no electricity. So that really throws me upside down. But I'm sitting in electricity now, so I've calmed down. I hate throwing out any food that I might have put in a fridge.
I understand.
And
There
how
are
much snow are you standing in now, Alex?
Oh my God. The snowbanks were up to our shoulders.
No, don't. That's what happened the last time I was in Canada. It was amazing.
Yes, this week we had record snowfall in Toronto. Historic
Really?
record, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. We were like
well,
Buffalo. It was a beautiful downtown um, panorama.
I enjoy cross-country skiing when the snow is on the pine trees. So beautiful.
Eh, Believe me, there were a lot of cars cross country flipping.
And that's when I like to get my skis on and and run away. Yeah.
Okay, any other
Oh, I
thoughts?
have a,
Dale,
I
go ahead.
forgot. I have a question for Alex. Um, I don't know if you want us to do what I think Mark and Ed are doing, but you know when you come with a new um, teaching, do you want us, is it possible that we can do a video section of that to make it stand out?
Yes, I
No.
think Lisbeth has been doing it from time to
Oh,
time, sometimes more and sometimes less. We see the teaching,
mhm.
just Alex is part of the teaching put into the television.
Yes.
Yes.
But even more than that, each time that Alex is teaching something new, to just focus one on that new part.
Oh,
So
I
it,
get what you're saying.
yeah. So that when you're teaching it for the first time, you usually put more information in.
Well, the thing is, we have two problems. One is that that new information has to be in context, and if the
Okay.
foundation is not laid, it's hard to build on.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to leave anybody behind. So not everyone has had the luxury of sitting in all these classes and spending enormous hours, doing this. But also the knowledge has been added on to all the time in terms of our physical understanding and our participation. That knowledge has been around, for all time, but it's our awareness that is now coming to the fore. So we're trying to explain this in a way that we can understand it. But here's the second difficulty, and that is not only when you're talking about what's new, but we have to have new words
Yes.
because
Yes.
words are created from what we know. And if you're teaching something new, which means it's something that you don't know, it needs new words. So, generally speaking, the educational system that we have is a word-made world and is teaching us things that you as a student may not know, but somebody does know. And generally speaking, that would be the teacher or the professor. But if you've ever asked a professor, oh, well, why is that? And then they say, well, we don't know. We're
We
still
don't know.
looking for it. It's like they say, they're still doing research to find a cure for cancer. And, but it seems to be an okay answer. I don't know. And
It, yeah, it runs the whole show. Or
yeah,
sometimes they cover things up in sugar, but and mislead you. So
which
what
is the
about
deception, yes.
yes? And what about then? Okay, so if there's a need for your section, I think you put it in with Ed. Is that correct?
Well,
Or some of them?
Ed has been putting the whole video
Hmm.
together online, and we're absolutely grateful that he's doing that. There are programs like they can actually cut that video very easily. Though the one I use is Lossless, Lossless, and you just
Lossless is the
yes,
name.
yes, it's a free program that you could snip the beginning and the end and just extricate the piece that you want.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so been using that for video modification that way. There is a lot of work that I'd like to do in addition to that, and we're
How
working.
about a dictionary?
Well, yeah, but we
Complete.
all are contributing in many ways. I mean, look at Mark, what a tower of strength he is, and all of the knowledge seekers on this panel, that they're all, working and pushing hard, and it's not the quantity, it's the quality, and
Okay. So
many.
that kind of leaves me with when you were answering our questions today, so those could be little ones.
Well, exactly. You
Okay.
just have to understand who is doing the talking. I am
Mhm.
neither. I'm not a. I do not have access to confidential information. I do not have access to the advanced research, and I don't have access to classified information.
Well,
What I
you-
have done is I have spent well over 30 years learning about this. So
well,
I have an advantage in that regard, which is why I'm teaching. But
mm,
in essence, if I compare my classes in 2026 with my classes in 2017, it's like night and day. And the big difference, of course, is that my knowledge is like your knowledge obtained in the physical world. How does that relate to the plasma world? What do you mean the plasma world? What plasma world? I don't see it. But, it's always been there. And now I realize it, and I've had a chance to review my life in that context. And that's kind of very depressing because really it kind of reflects on how much time we've wasted. But that time is necessary for each and every one of us because some of us can grasp something very, very quickly. And then some of us, we can spend a lifetime when we don't understand it. But it all depends on how we allow things to happen. So in my particular case, I was a very slow learner, and it really, the opportunity only came when I was smacked in the head with a severe debilitation in my health. And at that point you say, well, we've tried everything, and guess what? Everything doesn't work. Okay. So, and I tried something different, not because I tried it, it came to me. I said, well, wait a second. I have tried so hard to find something. And then when I stopped trying or even got depressed and gave up, all of a sudden it came to me. And this is the way the universe works.
yes, I was going to say that. Yeah.
And so that's a learning lesson. It's the same with uh, my current relationship. I wanted it. I searched for it. But you know what? I could not find it if that field didn't exist and didn't want to be found. You understand? It's a two-way street. And that is the thing that we're missing in all of our relationships, to understand that there has to be a reciprocity. It just has to be, give and take. The more you give, the more you can take. It just, that's the way it is. You want furniture? Sure, bring it and keep bringing it, and then just pile it on. And you can make yourself comfy wherever you want to be because you have Chesterfields on Chesterfields piled up, and you
Waiting.
yeah, and you say, "Oh, wait a second! I just wanted a Chesterfield and some furniture where I can sit down and maybe have some guests and enjoy some snacks and beverage and good conversation. I didn't want a house full of furniture. This is not like a warehouse. So we understand that there has to be a temperance to our greed, and it's natural to be greedy because we have a society where, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I look at my youth and life was brimming full of positivity. And I look at it now and say, you know, the quality of my life today is definitely worse than what it was before. Forget the technology, the quality of the life in every aspect of it. And we know it. We know what causes it. So that's no secret. But what can we do about it? Because here we are talking about and saying, oh, you know, life is so bad, and it becomes depressing. Why? Because we're in an absence of a solution. Well, us as knowledge seekers are not in absence of that solution. And that's why we're so enthusiastic about the coming of the science. And we're so confounded by the fact that there are people who are quite happy with their misery. Well, that's okay. Like they say, misery loves company. Well, that's kind of a handy statement. But I'll tell you, this misery doesn't enjoy that company. Like that's something that is repulsive. And we find that it separates us. So by imparting this misery and this abuse on us, we all separate, we all run away. Well, it's time to start running away and it's time to converge things. And we need to speed up everything. That's why we can quickly reconstruct everything. We can. We don't
And
have to take.
I also think everything that I watch and observe and how I feel about things, the mistakes I've made, they're absolutely necessary as long as I learn. That's the only foundation, just to learn from the mistakes. Don't spend your whole existence in guilt because what is that going to do? Nothing. So, um, if we learn from our mistakes, then we can progress. And if we get all, upset, oh my goodness, I made a mistake, blah, blah, um, learn. And that's it. But I mean, everything that you went through, it was a learning, and you were able to help other people with those things that happened to you. That was no accident and no mistake. It's where you came from. It's the best thing ever. As hard as it was. There you
Wow,
go.
that's brilliant. That's brilliant, Gail. Thank you so much. The depressing aspect, which I referred to, is an emotional baggage. And like you say, you have to carry that, right? Because that's part of the learning experience. And it's really sad when you don't learn. You know, you had the opportunity to learn, and all you dwell on is that emotional baggage and say, no, 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 open that bag, take the lesson that you've learned, and move on. Dump the emotional baggage. You don't need to carry that. You know, life did me wrong. No, life taught you how life works. Okay, it's just that you did yourself wrong. And that's what it took for you to learn the lesson. But we don't all have to go through that. Each of us has our own, if you say, you could say burden to bear. But that burden is whatever we're lacking, not in our soul or in our creation. We are lacking in our awareness and interpretation of that and how it manifests in our physicality. And then it gets reinforced. So it's hard to reinforce something against a pushback that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It requires an extremely strong internal gravitational force field. And that's what knowledge seekers are. And what edifies us? Well, the knowledge. So you can only lie to other people. You can't lie to yourself. And once you realize that, then you say, well, I wonder why I'm having these problems, because you're fooling yourself and not enlisting the services of the universe, which is abundant. And it's a cornucopia of energy that is coming to you unconditionally. So take that and then put the information together, and there's no competition. There's no saying, oh, Mr. Cash is, extremely knowledgeable, and I'm trying to achieve, that full knowledge that he has. That's a ridiculous goal to achieve. We all want to understand what Mr. Cash understands, but we can't do that with the words that we know. So we have to do it with our soul. And the Cash Foundation is giving us the tools to be able to do that. And this is great. So we just keep working with it, and in turn enlist the services of our neighbors, because they are part of our energy field. So
And one other interesting thing to me is that since we're all part of the creator, every aspect imaginable, so when we send back our lessons that we've learned, then we're making the whole picture better.
well, exactly. And there's you brought to mind a perfect point, which is really years ago. Uh, I went to these places where veterans would gather. So we talked about military veterans, and daily, I mean daily, they would recount their stories of their battles in the field and the glory. We're going to take that hill number 281. We're going to assault it, and we're going to win. And they go through and recount that story daily for many, many years. And that becomes the reason for their existence. And it's so sad.
Mm.
And then you look at other groups of seniors, and let's say each of them is 60 years old, and you put 10 in a room, that is 600 years of experience. And we cast it away. We put them into these nursing homes, and we, denigrate them and say, oh, you're old and decrepit, and you're senile, and you're useless. That is our resource. That is our wealth, our abundance of knowledge. So when you walk into a
Wisdom.
see, yeah, just because they retire doesn't mean they become stupid, And I ask many people, oh, like, what did you do, with your life? And they said, well, I'm retired. Okay, well, yeah, but what kind of knowledge did you attain? Oh, I used to be a teacher. Well, okay, so did you stop being a teacher when you retired? Or I used to be a carpenter. Did you lose all that knowledge? So we need to cherish that knowledge, and to understand that that is a contribution to our social structure in a positive way. And we have that, as Mr. Cash has said, we have mastered the physical universe. But, why is the quality of our life so poor? What's missing? And that is the answer. The moment you ask what's missing, that tells you where you have to look. So that's what we're doing. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor. Thanks, Gail. This is a really terrific point brought up.
And also, how is your little garden place growing? You showed me a picture once.
Um,
You abandoned it? Oh.
I would say for the most part, it is doing really, really well.
Oh,
I'm at the point now where I'm needing a larger place to operate.
oh, very good.
Well, that's what growth does.
Yeah. And thank you for your teaching, Alex.
And thank you for your support.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Thank you, Alex. Anyone else want to raise a point or a question? Carolyn says in the chat, the Wise Bank is much cheaper. Yes, I think I agree. That's what I've been using.
Absolutely, yes.
I think PayPal is asking for 5% or something like that. Maybe there's a cap on that, depending how much you transfer. But I haven't used that ever since Mr. Kesh said they were withholding some of the funds from the foundation. Maybe they've gotten that issue clear. Alex, you talked about the amino acids, and of course, Mr. Kesh said this is the inertia of life, but apparently all the aminos are not acid. You were saying today that one is slightly alkaline. And do you want to go into that? They're all not acidic, or are they? That's why I thought they called them an amino acid. Or is that the matter state? And we're looking, or you're speaking in the energy dimension?
No, it's the way the science has made discoveries, right? It's like saying, okay, well, we're carbon based, so we're organic, and the silicon based is inorganic. Whether it's organic or inorganic is irrelevant, because what is relevant is its gravitational form. So when we look at the fatty acids, we call them fatty acids because at the time that the first acids were discovered, the fatty acids, that is, they were acidic. But as we found, as the acids became more complex, they stopped being acidic. See, this is the issue. The issue is that when you look at the pH scale, see, that's such a terrific question you asked. When you look at the scale, the simple and unstable is acidic. It's the complex and stable that is alkaline.
Now, your understanding, if I may just interrupt, I was hearing where if you add sugar to a GANS, you make it more acidic or magnetical, and if it becomes more alkaline, it's more gravitational. Is that how you approach this as well, or
Yeah, the simple and unstable is magnetical. The stable and complex is gravitational. Our physical existence is highly, highly gravitational. Where we are on the threshold is to understand that in terms of understanding a maggrav field, it has to have a gravitational component. That gravitational component has to be present, whether or not it is in matter state or plasmatic state. So fundamentally, we say the physical state is the gravitational state and the plasmatic state is the magnetical state. So the PM-TIC on its own is a maggrav. In other words, the stabilizing component of the PM-TIC is the gravitational aspect of it. But the PM-TIC itself is magnetical because it is so tiny and it is so weak that it wants to go wherever, everywhere. And it will land in another gravitational field which has a common denominator.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else? Or did you want to add more? I know Mr. Kesh said there are going to be more books released, so this gives me an idea that maybe everything hasn't been shared with us so far, as I use that example of the magician. And
oh, no, of course not.
Yeah.
But Mark, we have to extend our knowledge into the unknown. Okay, we just have to have the foundation of it. If we understand this folding action, okay, so we start with this fatty acid. It's a saturated fatty acid, and because it's saturated, it is not exchanging energy, okay? So it is kind of neutral. And the moment we start releasing the hydrogen, in other words, the moment we make that environment acidic and it starts releasing that hydrogen, then the folding begins. In that folding process, we create on the outside this negativity, which is acidic. But inside the folding action is counterbalanced, is equalized by an alkaline formation. That alkaline formation is the formation of oxygen. So the oxygen is the aerobic component of alkalinity. The lack of oxygen is the acidic component of acidity. Okay, now that's not finished. Now that it's completed its task, it produces the water. So that energy has to come back in, and that folding has to straighten out. So you just, extend your arm as straight as you can, and then start curling your fingers and your knuckles and your hand and your elbow, then go through all these folding processes. Each point is a negative charge, and everything that you've done in that process of folding has created a gravitational component inside that arm. And you know that is true because that's how you do pull-ups and push-ups, and that's how you hug people. You grab them and you pull them towards you, right? Well, where's that strength? What's happened? You're acting on a gravitational emotion. So you're releasing that hydrogen, you're releasing that magnetical flow. What? You're going to just hug everybody and anybody? These tree huggers, they're depressing to watch. You imagine you're a tree and some guy comes and he hugs you. You can't run away, you're rooted into the ground. So it's handy to have the bark. If the guy really hugs you, they're not going to be comfortable. So you don't want people hugging you. You want people enjoying your beauty, and you want to, branch out, give off the leaves, give off the flowers, give off the beauty, contribute. And in that process, you're alkalizing the environment because you're contributing to that environment as a magrav. And you can only do that as a gravitational context. So we find that the trees respire the way the cells respire, the way that we respire. This is all part of the breathing on this planet. The key word is on this planet. That is the only part that we can see. But if you want to see if someone is lying, you have to get to the heart of the matter. You have to look at their soul. You have to look at their true intention. Words lie. Words are based on a knowledge that is known. So if I tell you what you want to hear, that is knowledge that you already know. But if I tell you what you need to know and you get offended, so oopsie, I don't want to offend you, so I'm going to tell you a flowery story. And then I'm lying to you. I'm really doing a disservice in that regard. So we're having frank discussions about that, because when we're talking about the knowledge, there has to be a coordination. There has to be a systematic explanation and an answer to this. So when you look at the amino acids, it's not like a lion tamer walks into a cage and, rah, sit Simba, I am brave, I'm gonna, I'm going to dominate a lion. That's not the way it happens. Try and train this omega 3, 6, and 9. Try and train it. Fold for me. Yes. Get the whip out, beat it. You can't do that. What you have to do is offer an aerobic environment and say, oh, now I have something to engage with, something that is common to me. Alpha linolenic acid. Omega-3 is absolutely essential for the production of oxygen and in turn production of water, in turn production of protein. Now you have construction and reconstruction and the continual action. It's the delay in consequences which is affecting the outcome. Oh, I tried this and, it didn't work. Really? Well, how did you give it a chance? Yeah, I tried it for a week. Well, when your healing takes 2 weeks and you only tried it for a week, guess what? It's like, well, I want to go on a trip and that trip is going to take 10 hours. And you say, well, I'm only prepared to go 5 hours. Well, you're not going to complete the trip. I'm sorry. So, you have to kind of take it into context. Well, that's what the plasma game is all about. How about if we can do instantaneous travel? Then you don't have to wait 10 hours. You don't have to wait 5 hours. It's instantaneous. Oh, is that possible? Well, why not? Back to you, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Anyone else, any of the other participants want to raise a point, ask a question, make a statement, perhaps? When you talked about the layering earlier, Alex, in one of your backgrounds there, I was thinking, is this in a way what we're doing where we collectively gather together and sort of for the elevation of the souls of others? Is this a type of layering process that in a way we're doing in the energy dimension? As he said, together we're much stronger than individually because you have a wider spectrum of fields to offer. So that's what triggered when you said this layering. I was thinking of when we joined together at the 9 p.m. Central European time and any other time, of course, but that's when we sort of operate collectively.
You are 100% correct. And this is what we're doing with the One Nation Network, one at a time, and building it and enlisting the services of the energy that is being transmitted, right? So more is more, less is less. And this is how we're doing it.
Yeah, I think we just have to reach that tipping point where we get a few million or so many people, 5% of the planet, wishing and gathering on this energy dimension that we'll see the, as he said, the souls decide, not the physicality, but the souls haven't decided to decide yet. We're just awakening the collective awareness.
Well, let me just draw your attention to one thing that a lot of people, they have these comments, that makes them look like really wise people, It only takes 3% of the population to create a revolution. What percentage of salt in the Dead Sea makes it dead? Do you know the answer to that?
Are you asking me? I don't know, but maybe someone else would know.
Okay, I kind of gave a clue. It's 3%. 3%. That's it.
So you're saying no life exists, but I think life does exist, probably in dimensions we're not familiar with.
No, I know, but we call it the physical Dead Sea.
Okay, I would agree with
And the
that.
content of it is water, but the content of the water holds about 3% salt. We're making GANs in the cups of life with as much as 15% salt content. Many of us with 9%, but 3% is death. So we know that we created life in the cups of life. So the moniker Dead Sea is actually a misnomer, isn't it? It's based on something that we have looked at something and coined a phrase and said, "Oh, it's dead," and yet we've exceeded the 3% in our cups of life, and we didn't call them the cups of death, did we? We didn't call them the cups of the pandemic. We call them the cups of life, because we were able to create a gravitational context in our GANs, which was a superconductor at room temperature, drawing in the energy that we needed, and at the same time giving off energy that we needed.
Now, when you were talking earlier about eradicating an energy pack, my understanding is we didn't eradicate it, or maybe we did in its current form, but we just drained some of its energy. We did not kill that energy pack, as I understand it. So we just sort of tamed its behavior or reduced its energy to the point where it could interact without being detrimental to us. So I don't think we actually destroyed that energy pack. We just sort of tamed it a little bit through the fields. Yeah.
Let's put it this way. An excellent example that was brought up was a sugar cube in a cup of tea. You put in a cube and it disappears. But the tea is now sweeter. So it's not in its physical cubic state, it's in a liquid state. So it used to be one thing, now it's something else. So there is no killing. This is a concocted, manufactured word that has no meaning. It's like garbage. You can't throw it away. You can't kill something. All you can do is transform it into some other energy. And because of the state of equilibrium, you as the killer cannot avoid the consequences that result in that, because you have depleted that energy and you've depleted yourself at the same time. You're not immune. And just because there was a delay in the consequences, I mean, imagine what that does to your guilt. Oh, isn't that what they call PTSD? Where you get this big bad soldier that is heavily trained and burdened with all this equipment and guns and everything, and with his courage and bravery and coordination, goes out and he does his job, and then he comes back and nothing could conquer him until he personally commits suicide, because there was a delay in consequences. I'm a killing machine. Are you? Well, that killing machine ended up killing themselves as a form of equilibrium. That is not justice. That is abuse. So there's a big difference. So as the One Nation, One Network is trying to show, we're eliminating that abuse through justice.
Maybe it'd be a good time just to bring up the game and show others this game.
I have another question.
Please.
Yeah. Mr. Kesh, with COVID, he said we were transforming the virus. There was no need to kill anything. And I always had a question about that, because I didn't think you kill anything, just like what you just said. It's just a transformation. It's a different kind of transformation. Like I use MMS and it just draws electrons away from things. That's just a transformation. It's not killing, but but it ends up appearing like killing, or we talk about it like killing. What is killing?
Yeah, and I think it's the same with humanity. We're just sort of creating different energies or draining some of our aggressive nature in a way that we become peaceful.
Yeah, I just don't understand what it is. What is killing? Or like when they cleaned up after Fukushima, they had things interact with what was there and change it. And like if we take an antibiotic, that is probably just also some kind of a way of transforming things. So what is killing? I don't know what it is.
Well,
Exactly,
it's also
Erm.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and remember that with that example of Fukushima you brought up, that plant was up and running within 2 weeks. And you know, when you look at the half life of a radioactive substance, 25,000 years. Oh, is 25,000 years 2 weeks? You know, maybe it's close. So something was wrong in our teaching. We're using the wrong words in the wrong context. So yeah, your point is, you know, bang on. Excellent. Thank you. Mark, I see you've taken the screen, so thanks everybody for allowing us to continue to present in here, and thank you all for your contributions. It's what makes us the Keshe American Knowledge Team so strong and contributes to the overall Keshe Foundation and all the knowledge seekers around the world. So let's keep it going.
So this is the actual game. We put the link in the chat. You can sign up or create a name and a password for yourself. It's only the beta version, so you can learn how to play and operate, become familiar with the planet a little bit more. It's all linked to the wiki where you can read about the you can read about different locations and populations and sort of get a feel for the planet. Again, for me, it's becoming a little bit of a smaller planet where I start to become a little bit familiar, even by hearing news reports when they say Myanmar or they say Thailand or other places, Vietnam. I can sort of picture it right now in a map, and I think this is how the transmutation process will start once the energy is added to this game. But again, you can do a lot with this game, as much of the technology is going to be embedded and used through this virtual game. And you teach yourself to become peaceful and enlightened in a way.
Yeah, I still have something to add to that.
Please.
I'm thinking maybe it's the malevolent intention, or in that regard, the emotion that we connect with it. But I still don't understand it. How that when eating an apple, how that hurts the apple or doesn't hurt the apple. You know, it's not clear to me. Because in that instance,
are you
I don't have a.
are you seeing yourself as equal to the apple?
No, I'm different.
Okay.
Um,
I thought all the souls were equal. I mean,
so we talk about souls, but doesn't each molecule or each atom inside of that stuff has a soul? So what are we killing?
yeah. No, you're just releasing it before its maturity point. As Mr. Keshe once said, try not to disturb a soul in motion.
Don't disturb a soul in motion.
Right. And of course, we have a habit of doing that quite often and think we're doing the right thing, but perhaps we don't know the full working of what the soul is doing and for what reason. As Mr. Keshe said with one of the knowledge seekers that wanted to leave, and Mr. Keshe said, we have to honor your soul. It wants to be in a different place, in a different position, even though we could do something in the physicality for you to stay here. We have to sort of honor that. So if the apple had the ability to eat you, and we turn the tables, so to speak, would you like being eaten and taken out of your structure? and being consumed. Where again, the idea is you haven't allowed the soul to mature, and therefore, in a way, as I see it, kind of indented soul now has to go out into the universe and try to exist without its maturity that it was supposed to reach at this level. So that's just the way I'm looking at it. And I think, again, as I said in another location, that, you know, he talked about the 99 names of God, and when you reach the 100th, I think that's when you get to the C24. But we're not, the 100th would be to see all of the others as equal to yourself in a way, not greater and not lesser. And this perhaps is the 100th name of God. And this is perhaps the C24 dimension that we're not used to, or we haven't experienced, because we've always thought ourselves in a way to be better than something else. But again, this is just the way I'm seeing it at this point, which is
okay. I guess I gotta contemplate that a while longer.
yeah. Again, it's up to you. But as we know, the Creator doesn't kill or destroy anything to exist, and if we're made in that image, we certainly can do the same. But we just got too enamored with the matter state and thinking it's the beginning and the end. And just amazing to hear ancestors were far more advanced than we are today, even though we have the plasma TVs and the cell phones and nuclear power plants. They were far more advanced in the energy dimension. This is what Mr. Kesh is bringing us back to, this understanding of the energy dimension, which again, you can't see it, sort of, you can feel it, but you can't touch it in the rest. And so when you go to explain that, it just, to, let's say, the unwashed, even though their soul understands it completely, the soul of physicality actually rejects it in a way. Or maybe it understands it and it's just the physicality that. So slowly, gradually, the fields are changing. The soup is going to become more tastier in a way for all of us. And that's the job of the universal teacher and those associated, I think, with this process. And we all have the opportunity to make the change, not only in ourselves, but in the whole structure of what's going on. But as Mr. Kesh said, you find peace within yourself first, or some sort of balance. And again, the sun hasn't mastered it, and perhaps the Creator hasn't mastered it either. Just the idea of being able to tame certain things, or to bring something back into balance that constantly goes out of balance. So if the sun is constantly readjusting itself, or moving millions of miles to accommodate the balance of the solar system, perhaps we need to learn how to work with that a little bit deeper and balance those emotions when they appear. But this is the game of peace and enlightenment. This is what Mr. Kesh is referring to in the store. This will be embedded as one of the combinations of things in the One Nation Network. And so you're all, this is how they're going to bring, or 1 billion people and more will bring themselves out of poverty by playing this game. And I think it'll be your new supermarket, your new power plant, your new wellness center, and probably your new travel center, as more and more of this gets embedded within the game. And of course, your growth in the knowledge area as well. When he went through the compression technology, he said that understanding would be embedded in the game. So that probably, plus other universal understandings, as you just play the game. Background fields are probably interacting, and more will be added to complete this process, as well as the land and the atmosphere and the soul of this planet, by creating this grid network. And as he said, it's not just for this planet. This grid will extend across the universe, if you can imagine that. So we're, again, at the pinnacle of technology, probably, at least in this part of the universe. And we're very humbled to be here and just to observe how a teacher who's been doing this for millions of years around the universe is approaching this. Now, every case may be a slightly different, just like when you go to court, you may have a certain charge and another person has the same charge, but the results may be different. So it's amazing and beautiful to watch the work of a universal teacher. And even the other universal teachers, as they do have meetings, apparently, somehow on the energy dimension, we're quite impressed of the way humanity is being brought along with such patience, but yet so thoroughly. Anyone else would like to add anything else? I'm going to play the final disclaimer. Perhaps before I do, we did look at the World Peace Treaty, of course, today, and this is what it's all about, you finding peace within yourself. And then, of course, I think as you start to do this work, play this game, you become, again, as you become the giver, remember Mr. Kesh said, we all receive basically the same. It's what you send out that, in a way, creates those waves and those differences. So as you connect the peace treaty with the game and with the, hello, Kitty, with many things, you can become proud of the work you do, and you'll be proud of the person you are, and you'll be proud of the difference you're making. Again, we may not see it manifest in the physicality immediately, but we know that the fields are in motion, and you're responsible for, in a way, creating that and sending those out. And so we thank you for that. Working with the plasma is quite easy, but we haven't really fully mastered the total understanding. As Mr. Kesh said, there's emotions and colors and carbons that we have not yet experienced. So there's a much deeper level of understanding that's coming slowly, collectively, but a lot of this, as I see it, will be brought through the gameplay as they embed certain things, technologies within certain systems to bring about certain conditions, or let's say touch up the soup that the creation made a little bit off, let's say, causing us to do many funny things on this planet, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we have the three wise men tying in the World Peace Treaty to the thinking, speaking, and acting, which, again, it's up to you to sort of investigate that, but you create a beautiful shielding, and I think you create hormones of satisfaction in a way when you give rather than take. That creates another hormonal condition that wants to take more. So we're learning step by step, and thank goodness Mr. Kesh is quite patient with the whole process, and to bring it to, this has been his mission in a way, and to bring it to its full conclusion. And then, of course, we have the work in the universe to work on as well. So it's just an amazing world of knowledge, universal knowledge that's being shared with us that no one, to me, has ever put it in such a succinct, comprehensive, but yet, in a way, slightly elusive nature. But that elusiveness will be tempered by the gameplay and a combination of other things, so that we'll all reach this position of peace and enlightenment. I'm going to play the final disclaimer unless someone else has something else to say. Thank you all again for being here. We appreciate your presence, and as we know, the souls have moved our physicality in and around the Kesh Foundation, even if you're just dabbling with it, if you're wondering, as I did for a long time, whether this was correct, not correct, and so on and so forth. But I've always had the feeling, and there's a special delivery Mr. Kesh has in his words and his combination of words, and using his soul apparently to transfer. But now it'll go to an even deeper transferring of this knowledge, as all the workshops will be embedded in the soul of the man as you continue to work through this One Nation, or the ONN network. So there's much more enjoyment to come for all of us and humanity as a whole. And of course, the universe.